The silence in my house is not empty. It has a weight. It presses against the windows and settles into the carpets like dust. Since my divorce, I have learned to live with it. But there are nights when the quiet feels almost aggressive. I think that is why I bought the frame. I wanted to see faces. I wanted to populate the dark corners of the living room with memories of people who were still alive, even if they were far away. It was a Saturday morning when I found it. I was walking through the neighborhood, trying to burn off the restless energy that wakes me up too early on weekends. There was a garage sale 3 streets over. It was the usual collection of unwanted things: old clothes, scratched cookware, paperback books with broken spines. The digital photo frame was sitting on a folding table near the back. It looked old. It was not one of those sleek, thin models you can buy online today. This one had a thick black border and a heavy glass screen. It felt like a brick in my hand. The woman selling it looked at me with a strange expression when I picked it up. She did not haggle. She just took the $5 and looked away, as if she was relieved to see it go. I did not think much of it at the time. I just wanted something to break up the visual monotony of my hallway. When I got home, I wiped the dust off the glass. I found an old SD card in my desk drawer and loaded it with photos. I chose them carefully. There was my younger brother, Mark, smiling at a barbecue last summer. There was my sister, Sarah, standing next to her new car. And there was my mother, sitting in her favorite armchair, holding a cup of tea. I placed the frame on the console table in the hallway, right outside my bedroom door. I plugged it in. The screen flickered to life with a low, electric hum. The colors were a bit washed out, but it worked. I set the timer to turn off at midnight, satisfied with my small purchase. The first night, I slept poorly. The air in the house felt thick. I woke up thirsty, my mouth dry and tasting of metal. I rolled over and looked at the clock. It was exactly 3 a.m. I got up to get a glass of water. The hallway should have been dark. It wasn't. A pale blue light was spilling onto the floorboards. The frame was on. I frowned, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. I was certain I had set the timer. I walked over to the console table to turn it off. The screen was displaying a photo of Mark, but it was not the photo I remembered uploading. In the original picture, Mark was holding a burger, grinning at the camera. In this version, the image was distorted. The pixels around his right arm were scrambled and shifted. They were a deep, angry red. The texture looked wet. It looked like the skin had been peeled away. I stared at it for a long time, trying to make sense of the digital noise. It looked like a severe burn. I unplugged the frame. The sudden darkness was a relief. I told myself it was just a corrupted file, a glitch in the old software. I went back to bed, but I did not sleep. The phone rang at noon the next day. It was Mark. His voice sounded tight, strained by pain. He told me he had been at work in the restaurant kitchen that morning. A pot of boiling stock had slipped off the burner. It had poured over his right arm. 3rd-degree burns. He was at the hospital. I stood in my kitchen, gripping the phone until my knuckles turned white. I made the appropriate sounds of shock and sympathy, but my eyes were fixed on the empty hallway. A cold knot formed in my stomach. It was just a coincidence. It had to be. That night, I left the frame unplugged. I double-checked the cord. It was coiled on the table, a foot away from the outlet. I went to bed early, exhausted by the strange anxiety that had taken hold of me. I woke up at 3 a.m. The light was back, I lay in bed, staring at the gap beneath my door. The blue glow was unmistakable. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I knew the cord was unplugged. I knew it. I walked into the hallway. The frame was active. The screen was bright, cutting through the darkness. It was showing a photo of Sarah. She was standing by her car, just like in the original photo, but the windshield was gone. In its place was a web of shattered white pixels and Sarah's face. I stepped closer, my breath catching in my throat. Her face was covered in dark, jagged lines. It looked like cuts, deep cuts. I grabbed the frame. It was cold to the touch. I turned it over, looking for a battery compartment. There was none. It was running on nothing. I pulled the SD card out and threw it across the room. The screen did not flicker. The image of my bleeding sister remained frozen on the glass. I threw the frame into the bottom drawer of the console table and slammed it shut. I spent the rest of the night sitting in the living room with all the lights on. At 10 a.m., Sarah called. She was crying. She had been driving on the highway. A truck in front of her had kicked up a loose stone. It had smashed through her windshield. Glass had flown everywhere. She had cuts all over her face, some of them deep enough to need stitches. She was lucky to be alive. I did not tell her about the frame. Who would believe me? The fear was no longer a cold knot. It was a heavy blanket that smothered me. I needed to destroy it. I took the frame out of the drawer. The screen was black now. It looked like a harmless piece of plastic. I took it to my study and connected it to my computer. I wanted to wipe the internal memory. I wanted to scrub it clean. My computer did not recognize the device. The screen remained black. I decided to physically destroy the memory. I took a screwdriver and pried the back casing open. I found the small green circuit board. I took a hammer and smashed it. I crushed the chips until they were nothing but dust and plastic shards. Then I put the casing back together, taped it shut, and put it back on the table. It was dead. I had killed it. I waited for the night. I sat in the hallway chair, watching the digital clock on my phone. The silence was absolute. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. 3:00 a.m. The taped casing hissed. The tape peeled back with a dry, scratching sound. The screen, which should have been broken, which should have been disconnected from any power source, lit up. I did not scream. I was past screaming. I was in a place of cold, numb acceptance. The photo was of my mother. She was not in her armchair. The background was the stairs in her house. She was lying at the bottom. Her legs were bent at angles that made me nauseous. Her head was surrounded by a dark halo of pixels. I grabbed my car keys. I did not think, I just ran. My mother lives 30 minutes away. I drove at 80 miles an hour. The roads were empty. The rain had started to fall, slicking the asphalt. I called her house phone over and over, but she did not answer. She is a heavy sleeper. I arrived at her house at 3:40 a.m. I used my spare key to burst through the front door. "Mom!" I shouted. "Mom!" She appeared at the top of the stairs, looking sleepy and confused. She was wearing her pink bathrobe. "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What's wrong?" "Don't move!" I gasped, leaning against the banister, trying to catch my breath. "Just stay there. Do not come down these stairs." I climbed up to her. I guided her back to her bedroom. I sat with her until the sun came up. I told her I had a bad dream. I told her I just needed to check on her. She made us breakfast. I thought I had beaten it. I thought I had changed the outcome. I helped her with some chores around the house that morning. At noon, I went to the bathroom. While I was washing my hands, I heard a terrible, heavy thud. I ran out. She had not fallen down the stairs. She had tripped over the edge of the hallway rug, but she had fallen hard. Her leg was twisted. Her head had hit the corner of the wall. The blood was spreading on the carpet, exactly like the dark halo in the photo. She survived. The doctor said it would be a long recovery, but she would live. I drove home that evening in a trance. The house was dark when I arrived. The rain was hammering against the roof. I walked into the hallway. The frame was sitting on the table. I had left it broken and taped. Now, the tape was gone. The casing was smooth. It looked brand new. I picked it up. It was heavy. I walked to the back door and opened it. The rain was coming down in sheets. I walked to the large garbage bin at the side of the house. I lifted the lid and threw the frame inside. I heard it hit the bottom with a solid thud. Then I found a heavy stone from the garden and smashed it down onto the bin lid to keep it closed. I went back inside. I locked the back door. I locked the front door. I checked the windows. I turned off every light in the house, plunging myself into total darkness. I went to my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. I waited. I checked my watch. 2:55 a.m. I closed my eyes. I could hear the rain. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. 2:59 a.m. I held my breath. 3 o'clock a.m. From the hallway, I heard a sound. It was the sound of a digital chime, a cheerful, synthetic beep that signaled a device starting up. I did not want to look. I wanted to curl up on the bed and cover my head, but I had to know. I walked to the bedroom door and opened it. The frame was back on the table. It was dry. There was no rain on it. It was glowing with that same pale, clinical light. I walked toward it. My legs felt like lead. I looked at the screen. It was not a photo of my family. It was not a photo of my friends. It was a photo of me. I stared at the image, my mind struggling to comprehend what I was seeing. The photo showed me sleeping in my bed. The angle was from high up in the corner of the room, near the ceiling. I have no camera there. I have never taken a photo from that angle. But it was not the impossible angle that stopped my heart. It was the content of the image. In the photo, I was asleep, unaware, but the lighting in the picture was wrong. It was darker than my room ever gets, and the pixels were shifting again. My face in the photo began to change. My sleeping expression twisted. My mouth opened in a silent scream. My eyes were wide, staring up at something. I looked closer at the screen. Behind my sleeping form, standing in the shadows of the doorway, was a figure. It was a tall, indistinct shape. It had no face, only a smooth, blank surface where features should be. Its arms were too long, hanging down past its knees, and it was leaning over me. I looked up from the frame. I looked at the reflection in the dark glass of the hallway window. The photo on the screen changed. The distortion cleared. The figure in the photo was not looking at the sleeping version of me anymore. It was looking directly at the camera lens. It was looking at the viewer. I realized then that the photo was not a prediction of an accident. The frame had run out of accidents. It had run out of warnings. The time on the frame's display changed to 3:01 a.m. The screen went black. The hallway plunged into darkness. I stood there, frozen. The house was silent. The rain had stopped. I realized where the photo had been taken. I realized where the figure had been standing. It was standing in the doorway of my bedroom. I was standing in the hallway, facing the table. My bedroom door was behind me. I felt a cold draft on the back of my neck. It was not from a window. The air in the house had become freezing. I did not turn around. I could not turn around. Behind me, from the darkness of my bedroom, I heard a sound. It was soft, wet, and deliberate. It was the sound of a bare foot stepping onto the wooden floor. Then, a voice. It did not sound human. It sounded like static trying to form words. It came from right behind my ear. 302. I closed my eyes, and then I heard the shutter click. I moved back into my father's apartment 3 weeks after the funeral. It was a small place on the 3rd floor of a building that seemed to actively repel the outside world. The silence here wasn't passive. It was a heavy, suffocating pressure, like deep water. The air felt thick and recycled, tasting faintly of old dust, copper, and the metallic tang of canned soup he used to eat. Even at high noon, with the blinds drawn, the corners of the rooms seemed to absorb illumination rather than reflect it. I told myself I was only there to sort his things, pack up a life in cardboard boxes, and leave. I did not expect the apartment to feel like it had been waiting for me. Most nights, unable to sleep in his old room, I sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and a cheap, flickering desk lamp. The rest of the apartment was a black void beyond that small circle of light. The building was old. It groaned. The fridge didn't just hum, it rattled with a wet, gurgling sound, like a throat perpetually clearing itself. The radiator hissed steam that smelled like stagnant water. Every noise made my skin prickle, a constant low-level flight response humming beneath my skin. In the back of the bedroom closet, buried under moth-eaten coats that still held his scent of Old Spice and decay, I found a shoebox. It was filled with old SD cards and mini DV tapes, labeled in his shaky handwriting. Home videos. Voice logs for reminders he would later forget. I started watching them after midnight. It was the only time the building's oppressive atmosphere seemed to lift just enough to let me breathe, as if the structure itself had finally gone to sleep. In the first few videos I queued up, dated about 8 months prior, my father was sitting at the very kitchen table where I now sat. He looked healthier then, more substantial. He was talking to the camera about the rising cost of groceries, about a noisy neighbor upstairs, mundane tethers to reality. The camera was propped on the counter near the sink, filming him from a slight angle, capturing his profile and the long, narrow hallway that led to the bedrooms behind his back. I missed it the first time. I missed it the second. It was only on the third viewing, half asleep, that my eyes drifted past him. In the hallway, the darkness wasn't empty. There was a vertical density to it, standing just outside the spill of the kitchen light. A stain on the air. It was taller than him, perhaps 7 feet if it stood fully upright, but it was hunched. I leaned in until my nose nearly touched the laptop screen, squinting against the pixels. It wasn't a shadow cast by furniture. It was a shadow that seemed to actively absorb the ambient light around it. I rewound the clip. My finger hovered over the trackpad. My father shifted his weight, uncomfortable in the wooden chair. A fraction of a second later, a delay so minute you'd miss it if you weren't looking for it. The stain rippled. It mimicked the shift, but it didn't move smoothly like muscle and bone. It jerked, stuttered, like a marionette with tangled strings being pulled by an inexperienced hand. I watched more. An obsession took hold. I stopped cleaning. Boxes remained half-packed. I spent hours scrubbing through timelines, my eyes burning, looking for the anomaly. Night after night, the shape grew more distinct in the recordings. It wasn't just a amorphous blob of absence anymore. It began to define itself. It had limbs, long, spindly arms that hung too low, ending in blurs that suggested too many fingers, a neck that looked broken, bent at a sickening 90-degree angle before snapping upright in a twitchy motion. In a video dated 4 months ago, my father scratched his nose absently. Behind him, deep in the hallway gloom, the shape raised a hand, but it didn't scratch. The mimicry was flawed, grotesque. It mimicked the upward motion of the arm, but the fingers didn't curl. They remained rigid, spear-like, looking like they were trying to push into the back of his skull rather than relieve an itch. I started slowing the footage down, frame by agonizing frame. The digital silence of the paused video was louder than the apartment. In one clip, my father took a sip of water. The shape mimicked the tilt of the head, but its jaw, or where a jaw should be, dropped open too wide. Unhinged, it hung slack against its chest. It looked like it was screaming in absolute silence. My stomach turned over, a cold stone of dread settling in my gut. I remembered the phone calls in the weeks before the end. He would call late at night, his voice trembling, whispering that the apartment felt crowded, that he couldn't get warm, that he woke up with bruise-like aches on his shoulders and neck. I had dismissed him. I had told him it was anxiety, loneliness. I told him to take sleeping pills. The guilt was a physical weight. I needed to see where he had slept. I went into his bedroom for the first time since arriving. The air was colder there. The bed was stripped, but I noticed something on the headboard. Scratches, deep gouges in the wood, right above where his head would rest. Not fingernail marks, something wider. I went back to the videos. In the recordings from 2 months ago, the entity was no longer content to stay in the hallway. It was on him. The visual overlap was nauseating to witness. It wasn't a solid presence yet, but a vibration. His outline looked fuzzy, buzzing at the edges, as if two people were fighting to occupy the exact same physical space. In moments where he sat perfectly still, staring blankly at the wall, I saw a second, fainter set of shoulders rise and fall, completely out of rhythm with his own breathing. I switched to the audio logs. He used to record reminders for himself. The later ones were just sounds of distress. I put on noise-canceling headphones and turned the volume up until the hiss of the empty room hurt my ears. In one recording, he was just breathing. But it wasn't one person. It was layered, a wet, rattling breath underneath his own shallow one. I isolated the track, filtered out the background noise. There was a faint rhythmic sound underneath his exhalations, a clicking, like teeth chatter, but softer, cartilage snapping. Back to the video, a clip from 3 weeks before he died. He stopped speaking mid-sentence. The intelligence seemed to drain from his face. His eyes went dead, glassy, like a doll's eyes. He stared right into the lens for a full minute without blinking. Tears rolled down his cheeks, but his face remained a frozen neutral mask of apathy. Then his voice changed. It didn't sound like him. It sounded wet, grinding, like stones rubbing together underwater. "It fits better now," he whispered. The horror wasn't just the voice, it was the sync. The voice didn't match the movement of his lips. The lips moved a fraction of a second after the sound came out, like a badly dubbed foreign film. I checked the timestamp, 2 weeks before the massive heart attack that killed him. The final videos were nearly impossible to watch. I was shaking so badly I could hardly control the mouse. His posture was wrong. Human spines don't curve like that. He sat with his back unnaturally straight, rigid, his head cocked sharply like a curious bird's. When he moved, it was with a terrifying, fluid grace, a sliding motion that my lumbering, arthritic father never possessed. In the very last file on the card, dated the day before he died, he just smiled. He looked at the camera and smiled. The smile stretched and stretched. It went past the gum line. It pulled the skin around his eyes taut until they looked like raw red wounds. The corners of his mouth seemed to tear. He held that impossible rictus for 40 seconds without a single twitch of muscle. Then the camera shook violently. Not because he touched it. He hadn't moved. It shook because the hallway behind him seemed to lurch forward, the darkness expanding, rushing the lens. The video cut to static. I slammed the laptop shut, breathing hard. The kitchen was freezing, though the radiator was blasting heat. I could smell ozone, sharp and electric, and underneath it, something stale and organic, like old meat going sour. I was losing my mind. That had to be the explanation. Grief had broken me. I needed to prove I was crazy. I needed to prove this was just stress, lack of sleep, and a broken camera sensor creating digital artifacts. I set up my own phone on the counter, propped against the sugar jar. I turned the selfie camera on. The high-definition screen stared back at me. I hit record. I sat in the chair. The wood was cold through my jeans. "My name is David," I said to the phone. My voice shook so hard the words fractured. "I am cleaning my father's apartment. It is October 14th. I am alone." I stared at the black rectangle of the hallway behind my shoulder in the phone screen. I refused to turn around. Nothing moved in the screen. I waited 5 minutes, silence stretching until my ears rang. I felt foolish. The adrenaline crash hit me, making my hands tremble. I stopped the recording. My heart rate began to slow. It was just a video, just a lonely man scaring himself. I played it back on the small screen. The first 4 minutes were normal, just me, looking tired, pale, eyes darting nervously. Then, at the 4:12 mark, I blinked. On the screen, my eyes closed. They didn't open again. The timestamp kept ticking. 4:13, 4:14, 4:15. For 3 full seconds, the recording showed me sitting there with my eyes shut tight. But I knew I had opened them immediately. I hadn't rested my eyes. I was too terrified to. In the video, while my eyes were shut, the silence changed. A sound, soft like wet leather, sliding on itself. And then my mouth began to move. I didn't speak. I remember sitting there in total silence. I didn't make a sound. But on the screen, my lips curled up, slowly, jerkily, a smile, not my smile. It was the stretched, tearing, hateful smile from my father's last video. And then, from the deepest darkness of the hallway behind me, 2 long gray hands drifted out. They were indistinct at the edges, like smoke, but solid in the center. They didn't grab me. They didn't choke me. They slid into me. They pressed into my shoulders, melting through my t-shirt, disappearing into my skin like water into a sponge. My on-screen body jolted once, violently, a spasm that I have no memory of feeling. Then on the screen, my eyes snapped open. The pupils were wrong. They were blown out, dilated so wide the irises were gone. My eyes were almost entirely black holes staring back at me. The video ended. That was 2 days ago. I haven't slept since. I'm sitting in the chair now. The laptop is open. I can't close my eyes. I am physically unable to. When I try to close them, I feel a resistance, a hydraulic pressure pushing back. It feels like there is a second set of eyelids underneath mine, rigid and locked, that wants to stay open, wants to see. I avoid mirrors. I draped a towel over the bathroom glass. But I can't avoid the reflection in the kitchen window at night. When I walk past it, the reflection lags. Just a millisecond. The man in the window is always just a tiny bit slower than I am. Yesterday, I dropped a water glass in the kitchen. I was tired. It slipped from my fingers. I saw it falling toward the tile. I resigned myself to the mess. I didn't move to catch it, but my arm did. It shot out with a blinding speed, a whip-crack velocity I do not possess. It caught the glass inches before it hit the floor. The movement was precise, mechanical, and completely alien to my own physiology. It wasn't a reflex. It was a test run, a calibration. I am typing this now to leave a record, but my fingers feel incredibly cold, numb at the tips. They feel heavy, like they belong to someone else. The thoughts in my head are growing quiet, distant, like I'm hearing them from the bottom of a well. And sometimes I have to wait. I have to wait for my fingers to stop twitching on their own before I can type the letters I actually want. The cold is spreading up my arms now. It's not painful, it's just heavy. I think it fits better now. My office was a basement box that smelled of ozone and stale coffee. There were no windows. The air was recycled and thin. For 8 hours a day, I sat in a rolling chair that squeaked every time I shifted my weight. I was a content moderator for one of the biggest social media platforms in the world. My job was simple. I stared at a screen. A video popped up. I watched it. I clicked approve or delete. They did not hire me for my skills. They hired me for my resilience score. I was the firewall between the public and the abyss. I filtered the sewage of the internet so that normal people could scroll through their feeds without seeing the things that I saw. I saw car crashes, I saw animal cruelty, I saw street fights that ended in death. By the 6th month, I was hollow. I felt like a pumpkin that had been scraped clean of its seeds. I stopped sleeping. When I closed my eyes, the videos played on the back of my eyelids. I was ready to quit. I was ready to walk out the door and never touch a computer again. Then management introduced the Halo program. They called it a breakthrough in mental hygiene. The technician explained it to me as he unpacked the device. It looked like a pair of heavy glasses with thick rims connected by a wire to a processing unit that clipped onto my belt. It uses an algorithm to intercept the signal between your eyes and your brain, the technician said. It does not blind you. It softens the edges. It translates trauma into neutrality. It turns horror into harmony. I was desperate. I let him strap it to my head. I felt the cold metal contacts press against my temples. He flipped the switch. The hum of the server room vanished. It was replaced by the sound of ocean waves crashing gently against a shore. The harsh fluorescent lights above my head softened into a warm candle-like glow. I opened the queue for the day. The first video was flagged for extreme violence. I clicked play. In the real world, a man was being attacked with a baseball bat. I knew this because the metadata told me so. But through the halo lenses, I saw something else. The weapon was blurry and soft, like a long loaf of bread. When it struck the victim, there was no blood. There was a burst of colorful confetti. Bright red and blue and yellow paper squares rained down like a celebration. The victim did not scream. He laughed. It was a distorted loop of laughter, but it was not painful. It was joyous. I felt my heart rate slow down. My hands stopped shaking. I clicked delete. I processed 400 videos that hour. I felt lighter than air. I felt clean. At 5 o'clock, we were supposed to leave the devices in our lockers. I looked at the locker. Then I looked at the door. I could not go back out there. I could not go back to the noise and the filth and the sharp edges of reality. I slipped the processing unit into my pocket. I pulled my hood up. I walked out past security. The guard waved at me. To my eyes, he looked like a friendly cartoon character, glowing with a soft, golden light. The subway ride home was usually an ordeal of aggression and bad smells. With Halo, it was a symphony. The graffiti on the tiled walls swirled like living oil paintings. The trash on the tracks looked like piles of gold coins. A homeless man was screaming at a tourist near the turnstiles. Through my filter, he looked like an opera singer in velvet robes. His scream was modulated into a beautiful baritone area. I stopped to listen. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. I dropped a $20 bill into his cup and walked away feeling benevolent. My apartment was in a bad part of the city. The building was rotting from the inside out. There was mold in the corners of the bathroom ceiling. The neighbors upstairs fought constantly. I unlocked my door and stepped inside. The Halo algorithm worked instantly. The peeling paint on the walls smoothed out into textured artistic plaster. The mold in the corner transformed into a patch of lush green moss, like a vertical garden. The pile of dirty laundry on the floor looked like a drift of soft white clouds. I sat on my couch. I did not turn on the television. I just stared at my room. It was a palace. I was a king. I never wanted to leave. Weeks turned into a blur of peace. I stopped going to work. I figured they would fire me eventually, but I did not care. I had my severance package wrapped around my head. I found a way to charge the battery pack while wearing it. I slept with the glasses on. I showered with a plastic bag over the belt unit. I stopped eating regular meals. Food was messy. Dirty dishes were stressful. Halo blurred the rotting leftovers in the sink until they looked like abstract sculptures. If I could not see the rot, it could not hurt me. I ate protein bars and drank tap water. It was efficient. It was clean. Then my sister Sarah came to visit. I had not answered her phone calls in a month. The ringing of the phone was jarring, so Halo muted it. I only heard a soft chime every time she called. When she knocked on the door, it sounded like a drumbeat in a song. I opened the door. Sarah stood in the hallway. In reality, she probably looked terrified. She probably saw a skeleton of a man standing in a room full of garbage. But I did not see that. I saw an angel. She was glowing with a soft white radiance. Her worried expression was smoothed into a beatific smile. "Elias," she said. Her voice was a flute. It was melodic and sweet. "You have not been answering me." I ushered her inside. "Look at this place, Sarah," I said. "Isn't it beautiful?" She stopped in the hallway. She looked down at the floor. I knew there were pizza boxes and trash bags there, but to me they were marble stones. "Elias, what is that smell?" she asked. I took a deep breath. The air freshener had run out weeks ago. The apartment must have smelled of decay, but Halo stimulated my olfactory center. "It is lavender," I said. She walked into the living room. She stepped over a pile of refuse that I saw as a silk rug. She turned to face me. "Take those glasses off," she said. Her voice dropped a register, but Halo interpreted it as a soothing whisper. "I need them," I said. "They help me see." "You look sick," she said. "You are pale. You are shaking. Take them off." I backed away. "I feel fantastic, Sarah. I have never been better." She reached for my face. To me, her hand looked like a beam of sunlight reaching out to caress my cheek. But when she grabbed the frames, the pressure was real. It was sharp and intrusive. "Take them off," she screamed. For a split second, she managed to dislodge the left temple pad. The connection severed. Reality crashed in. The smell hit me first. It was a physical blow. A wave of rotting garbage and sour milk and unwashed body odor. Then the sight. My apartment was a sty. Flies were circling the trash in the kitchen. Real buzzing black flies, not the sparks of golden light. Halo showed me. And Sarah, she was not smiling. She was crying. Her face was red and blotchy. She was screaming, spit flying from her mouth. "Look at you," she yelled. "Look at this place. You are dying, Elias." The stress was instantaneous. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The ugliness was too much. It was raw, abrasive sandpaper on my soul. I could not breathe. "Put it back," I shrieked. "Put it back!" I shoved her. I did not mean to hurt her, but I needed the filter. I pushed her hard. She stumbled back. She hit the coffee table. She fell. I jammed the glasses back onto my nose. I pressed the temple pads until they dug into my skin. I waited for the sink. The world sighed. The rotting garbage turned back into marble. The flies became specks of dust dancing in a sunbeam. Sarah was on the floor. She was not crying anymore. She was lying there, peaceful. A small pool of red liquid was spreading from her head where she hit the corner of the table. Halo filtered it. It was not blood. It was a spilled glass of wine. A rich burgundy Merlot. Sarah was not unconscious. She was just resting. She was taking a nap. She looked so peaceful. "Shh," I whispered, stepping over her sleeping form. "It is okay. Relax." I went to the kitchen and sat on the counter. I swung my legs. I felt great. But the device was starting to get warm against my temples. A low fever heat. The algorithm was working harder than ever. It had to filter everything now. 3 days later, the fire started. I think I left a candle burning near the curtains. Or maybe it was the overloaded extension cord for the Halo charger. I heard a noise, a loud rhythmic beeping. Halo intercepted the frequency. It changed the pitch. It softened the attack. It sounded like a steel drum band, a gentle tropical rhythm. Ping, ping, ping. I tapped my foot to the beat. "Catchy," I murmured. Then came the smoke. Thick black choking smoke rolling out of the bedroom. My eyes watered, but the visual override kicked in immediately. The black smoke turned white. It swirled beautifully like dry ice at a concert or the mist rolling off a mountain lake in the morning. It was atmospheric. It added mood to the apartment. I sat on the couch watching the mist fill the room. Then the heat. The flames licked up the wall. To me, they were not fire. They were the northern lights. Waves of green and purple and soothing blue dancing across the ceiling. "Beautiful," I whispered. Tears of joy ran down my face behind the lenses. I started to cough. My lungs burned. Halo adjusted the sensation. It was not burning. It was the feeling of a menthol lozenge, cold, crisp, refreshing. I took deep breaths of the smoke. The front door exploded inward. Men in heavy gear rushed in, firefighters. But through the halo, they did not look like firefighters. They looked like astronauts or angels. They were glowing, dressed in suits of white light. They were shouting, "Get him! He is still in there!" Halo tuned their voices into a choir, a Gregorian chant rising in crescendo. One of the angels grabbed me. He shook me. I smiled at him. I pointed at the ceiling at the beautiful dancing lights that were consuming the drywall. "Do you see it?" I asked him. "It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." He did not smile back. He looked frantic. His mouth was moving, but I could not hear the urgency, only the music. He tried to pull me up. I resisted. I did not want to leave the show. "Let me stay," I begged. "I am finally happy." He dragged me. I fought him. I clawed at his suit of light. Then a beam from the ceiling fell between us. The angel stumbled back. I fell back onto the couch. The heat was intense now. My skin should have been blistering. My nerves should have been screaming. But Halo was running at maximum capacity. It was overclocking my brain to block the trauma. The pain was translated into warmth. A deep, comforting warmth like sinking into a hot bath after a long day in the snow. It felt like a hug. The angel was screaming something from the other side of the wall of fire. I waved at him. "I am okay," I shouted through the music and the mist. "I am okay." The lenses of the glasses were beginning to melt. The plastic frame was fusing to my skin. But even as the device died, even as the circuits fried in the heat, it held on to the illusion until the very last nanosecond. The fire roared. The choir sang. I closed my eyes, bathed in the warmth, and waited for the song to end. I am currently in the St. Jude burn unit. The date is November 12th. I survived with third-degree burns over 60% of my body. The optical nerves were severed during the removal of the fused device remnants. I am permanently blind. The doctors say I am making a remarkable recovery. They say my skin is healing. They say I am lucky to be alive. They do not understand. The physical pain is manageable. I have medication for that. The real problem is the darkness. Without the halo filter, the darkness is loud. It is not empty. It is heavy and rough. It scrapes against my mind. When the nurses come in to change my dressings, I do not scream. I do not cry. I simply stare at the ceiling with my sightless eyes and hum the tune of the fire alarm. Yesterday, a doctor asked me how I was feeling. "It looks so ugly," I whispered, gesturing to the black void that only I can see. "Please, turn the lights back on. Put the glasses back on. It is too ugly out here." He told me the room was empty. He told me I was safe. He lied. I can feel them. Without the filter, I can sense the monsters standing in the corners of the room. They were always there. The halo just painted over them. It turned them into lamps and chairs and coat racks. But now the paint is gone. The filter showed the world how it should be. You are the ones living in the nightmare. I was the only one who woke up. And now I have been dragged back down. I refuse to eat. I refuse to sleep. I am terrified that if I fall asleep, I might dream of the real world. I lie here in the dark and I wait. I wait for the heat to come back. I wait for the northern lights. I hum the song of the steel drums, and I pray that if I hum it loud enough, the angels will come back to finish the job.